The warrior had been in the ground for over 1,000 years. Grave BJ 581, excavated at Birka, Sweden, in 1878. The archaeologist who opened it found a complete war kit: a sword, a shield, a battle axe, a spear, arrows, and 2 horses, one bridled and ready for combat. He also found a full set of gaming pieces laid across the body's lap, not pieces for passing time. Pieces used to plan tactical movements. Whoever lay in that grave had not just fought, they had commanded. For 130 years, every museum label, every academic paper, every public exhibition called this warrior male. The assumption was so automatic it was never tested. In 2017, scientists ran a DNA analysis on the bones. 2 X chromosomes. Know why the warrior was a woman? Not possibly. Not probably. Genetically, chromosomally, definitively, a woman. Buried with every marker of the highest military rank the Viking world could offer. Which means for 130 years, the history books were wrong. Not because the evidence was missing. Because nobody thought to look. This video is about what else they didn't look for, and what the graves, when finally forced to speak, revealed about the women the sagas buried twice, once in the earth, and once in silence. The Viking Age runs from 793 to 1066 AD. It begins with a raid on a monastery and ends with a battle in England. In between, 3 centuries of expansion so aggressive it touches 4 continents. Norse settlers reach Baghdad, Constantinople, Newfoundland, North Africa. This is not a peripheral culture. This is one of the most mobile, militarized, and commercially sophisticated civilizations of the medieval world. The world they inhabit smells of pine tar and salt. Longhouses are dark inside, lit by hearth fire, smoke filtering out through a hole in the roof. Animals live alongside people in winter. The line between warrior and farmer is not fixed. The same man who plows in spring raids in summer. But what do the women do? The Christian chroniclers who record the Viking raids, the monks, the bishops, the Latin literate survivors, write about what they fear. The men with axes. The sagas themselves, written down centuries after the events they describe, are shaped by the Christian Scandinavian scholars who transcribed them. By that point, the Church has firm views about what women are and are not capable of. The tension at the heart of this video is a simple one. The written record is controlled by men who have reasons to erase certain women. The earth has no such reasons, and the earth remembers everything. Back to BJ 581. The grave is excavated by archaeologist Hjalmar Stope in 1878 on the island of Björk in Lake Mälaren, the location of Birka, one of the most significant trading and military centers in the Viking world. Stope records everything. The sword, the axe, the spear, the shield, the arrows, the 2 horses, the gaming pieces. He assumes male. He writes male in his notes. The skeleton is stored, catalogued as male, and displayed accordingly. 140 years later, a team led by researcher Charlotte Hedenstierna Johnson at Stockholm University runs ancient DNA analysis on the remains. The results are published in the American Journal of Physical Anthropology in September 2017. 2 X chromosomes. No, I got the scholars who challenge the finding do not challenge the DNA. They challenge the interpretation. Perhaps the weapons belong to a man buried earlier in the same spot. Perhaps the gaming pieces have a ceremonial rather than martial meaning. Perhaps she is buried with male items for symbolic reasons. Stope's own excavation notes destroy every argument. He records the precise position of every object relative to the skeleton. The sword is at her side. The shield is across her body. The arrows are within arm's reach. The horses are positioned as they would be for a rider about to mount. She is not buried near a warrior's equipment. She is buried as the warrior. And the gaming pieces. A full set in a warrior grave, placed in the lap of the person buried. This is a marker of command. Of someone who moves pieces across a board, the way they move troops across a field. Whatever this woman is, she is not infantry. She plans battles. In 1904, workers on a Norwegian farm begin digging into a burial mound near the Oseberg farm in Vestfold. What they uncover becomes the most significant Viking Age archaeological find in history. A ship, 67 feet long. Buried intact inside the mound, preserved by clay. Inside, 2 women. The burial contains items of staggering wealth and complexity. 4 elaborately carved sleighs. A wagon, the only complete Viking Age wagon ever found. 15 horses, 6 dogs. 2 oxen. Tapestries. Kitchen tools. A medicine bag containing cannabis seeds. 1 woman is elderly, between 70 and 80 years old. The other is between 50 and 55. The elderly woman's bones show a condition that limits her movement. She has not rowed ships or swung axes in her final decades, yet she receives the more elaborate burial treatment, wrapped in a feather duvet, placed with greater ceremony. For decades, scholars argue that the wealthy burial must be the younger woman, because the elderly woman is physically diminished. Reanalysis overturns this completely. The scholarly consensus now leans toward the older woman being a vulva, a Norse seeress, a practitioner of the magic the Norse call seer. The medicine bag supports this. The cannabis supports this. The sheer extravagance of the burial supports this. In the Norse world, the vulva holds a position of power that has nothing to do with physical strength and everything to do with knowledge, prophecy, and the manipulation of fate. She is not erased because she lacks power. She is erased because the kind of power she holds makes the Christian chroniclers profoundly uncomfortable. A woman who can advise kings and alter destiny through ritual, that is not a figure the new religion has any use for. So they bury her in the earth, and they bury her in the texts. The pattern of erasure is consistent enough to look intentional. But the graves are only part of the story. Because there are women in the Viking world who are not erased at all, who are written about, named, and recorded. And what is written about them is far darker than what is left out. The sagas mention them: Hervor, Brynhildr, Lagertha. The shield maidens, Skjaldmur in Old Norse, appear throughout Norse literature as women who take up arms, lead raids, and die in battle. For most of modern academic history, they are dismissed as literary devices, symbolic figures. Fantasy projections. Myth, the graves say otherwise. A 2020 study published in the Cambridge Archaeological Journal examines burial sites across Scandinavia and the Viking diaspora, sites in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Iceland, the British Isles, and Russia. Of the female burials that contain weapon, a significant number also contain other markers of active, not ceremonial, military life. Healed weapon injuries on the bones. Evidence of habitual horse riding in the skeletal structure. Burial positioning consistent with military rather than domestic identity. Healed weapon injuries. Not cuts sustained during an attack on a settlement. The kinds of injuries warriors accumulate over time, wounds that were survived, that closed over, that the body integrated. A woman whose bones show a healed sword cut to the forearm was in combat. There's no other mechanism. In the Orkney Islands, at a site called Westness on the island of Rouse, a 10th century Norse woman is buried with a sword and a pair of tortoise brooches, the latter being a specifically female Norse identifier. The combination is documented, and then, in subsequent scholarly literature, quietly dropped from discussion about female Viking warriors. She exists. She is documented. She is disappeared by citation, by the act of simply not being included when the canon is assembled. The Grágás, the Grey Goose Laws, is the oldest surviving body of Icelandic law, compiled in the 12th century, but reflecting legal tradition stretching back centuries before. It is a remarkable document. Norse women, under this legal framework, can own property, they can inherit, they can divorce their husbands, and the grounds include impotence, violence, and failure to provide. A divorced woman reclaims her dowry. Widows control their own estates. Women who are heads of households hold the legal standing of men in most practical respects. By the standards of contemporary medieval Europe, where a married woman in England, France, or the Holy Roman Empire has essentially no legal existence separate from her husband, Norse women occupy a position that will not be matched in most of the Western world for another 700 years. This is not celebrated history, it is barely taught history. Because the Christianization of Scandinavia between the 10th and 12th centuries does not happen gently, it happens with political pressure, with the threat of exclusion from European trade networks, and with the gradual replacement of Norse legal custom with canon law. Canon law, which holds that women are legally subordinate to their fathers and then their husbands. Canon law, which classifies female seer practitioners as witches. The old laws are not burned. They are preserved in the Grágás, in Icelandic scholarship, because the Icelanders commit to maintaining their legal heritage. But the world the laws describe is already gone by the time the laws are written down. The women the laws protected have been converted, constrained, or erased. In 873 AD, the Great Heathen Army, the most significant Viking military force ever to descend on England, winters at Repton, in Mercia. They dig in, they fortify the church, they hold the territory through spring. When archaeologists excavate the Repton site in the 1970s and 1980s, they find a mass grave. 264 individuals, arranged around a central burial of what appears to be a high-status male warrior. The mass grave is interpreted as the war dead of the Great Heathen Army, the men who invaded England. DNA analysis, completed in the 2010s, produces a result that stops the conversation. Roughly half of the individuals in the mass grave are female. Half. The Great Heathen Army, the force that terrorizes England for a generation, that destroys kingdoms, that is recorded in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle as the gravest military threat the island has ever faced, brings women with it. Not as captives. The burial treatment does not support captive status. These women are buried within the group with care, in the same mass arrangement as the men. Some have grave goods. They are not thrown in. They are placed. Now hold that image. 264 people buried together. Warriors buried together. Half of them women. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, the primary written record of this period, does not mention women in the Great Heathen Army, not once. The chroniclers who write about the invasion, who document the burning of churches and the fall of kingdoms, record an army of men. They are watching the same army. They simply do not write down what does not fit their understanding of what an army is. And here is the weight of that fact. Anglo-Saxon Chronicle is the primary source. When historians write about the Viking invasion of England, they draw on it. When documentaries are produced, they draw on it. When school curricula are assembled, they draw on it. For 1,000 years, the authoritative record of the Great Heathen Army describes an army of men. Because the men who wrote the record cannot conceive of what they are actually seeing. The women are there. The women fight, or provision, or command. The bones do not yet tell us everything, but they are not left behind. They cross the North Sea with the army. They winter at Repton. They die at Repton. And they are buried with the army. The Chronicle does not erase them deliberately. That is almost worse. It erases them automatically. The way you do not notice what you do not expect to exist. The Birka warrior, the Oseberg seeress, the Westness woman with her sword, the 264 at Repton. They are not exceptional. They are not anomalies. They are not symbols. They are people whose existence contradicts the story that power needs to tell. And so the story is told without them. Not history is not a record of what happened. It is a record of what the people with writing tool chose to write down, and what they chose not to. The Viking women are not erased by hatred. Most are not erased by conspiracy. They are erased by assumption. The assumption, so embedded it requires no thought, that certain people do certain things and certain people do not. An assumption is more durable than a lie. A lie can be exposed. An assumption is never tested. Because the question is never asked. For 130 years, nobody DNA tests the Birka warrior because nobody thinks to ask whether the warrior might be female. The data is always available. The bones are there. The question just isn't. And we have to sit with the implications of that. Because the assumption does not die in the Viking Age. It is carried forward through the medieval period, through the Renaissance, through the Enlightenment, where rational men build rational systems of knowledge and assemble the data that confirms what they already believe. Every field that relies on historical assumptions about who mattered, who acted, who built, who fought, every field is working with a data set shaped by the same filter. The graves are being reopened. The DNA is being tested. The footnotes are being excavated. And one by one, the women are coming back. The question is not whether the record was incomplete. The question is, what else is still buried, and whose story is still being told without them? If you want more history they buried, subscribe. New video every day.